What is your haha? Oh wait, you're serious. Most awkward moment? Some guys where I worked were planning to gang abuse a girl in the parking lot when the shift ended. It wasn't a hilarious story even at first, but it really seemed like just really horribly inappropriate joking. It was a lunch table I sat down at during my break with guys around my age. At first I was just really uncomfortable and just tried to shut up and tune it out. But then they tried to include me, and it escalated to them full-out planning details, and I was just about sick at the table. I was absolutely sure they were going to do it. So as soon as they were gone, I went and told my dad, who was the safety guy at the plant. And he made sure cops were waiting for them in the parking lot, and that girl had someone walking her to her car from then on. Whole thing was so ducked. Commenter, good on you for getting involved. You reminded me of a story that's sort of the opposite of this thread. My dad told me about one time when he was in high school gym class. This would have been in the late 70s. He overheard a couple guys whispering to each other about someone having been abused. My dad starts getting all pissed off and tries to eavesdrop to figure out what happened. These guys are talking very quietly, sort of looking around to make sure no one could hear them. My dad catches little pieces like, I don't know if he really did it. Doesn't seem like something he would do. She's lied about that kind of thing before. And so on. Finally, my dad can't take it anymore, gets himself all worked up, and pushes one of the kids against a locker and asks him what happened, who was involved, etc. Turns out these kids were talking about some soap opera and they were just too embarrassed that they watched it that they didn't want anyone to hear them talking about it. Story 2. When I was in high school, I received a message over MSN from a buddy saying, Mitch is dead. Thinking he got into trouble, I responded with, ha, what did he do? It turns out he had a brain aneurysm while driving home from school. Commenter. Hi, that was me. Or at least that happened to me. About to board a 16-hour flight after scrambling 8 hours to get to the airport and then having to sleep on benches because the transit hotel was full. Get through all the crap, explain why I didn't have any luggage, but carry on to like 3 different security people, get in my middle seat jammed between a Korean guy and Chinese lady. I speak neither language. Last check to let my mom know I'm about to take off. Boom. Aunt posted about Grandpa's death on Facebook. After everyone being told not to because they didn't want me traveling so far and long upset and knowing I wouldn't make it, found that out at the funeral. Worst 16 hours trying not to cry uncontrollably in my surprisingly spacious seat. So that was a plus, I guess. Another foreigner behind me saw I was really upset and gave me some anti-anxiety pills and Dramamine, which is the only way that was tolerable. Robert from NH, you were a real bro. Story 3, I asked a coworker with what his son's name was, and he answered Legolas. After 2 seconds of laughing, I realized he wasn't laughing. His son is actually named Legolas. Commenter. I was walking my dog a few weeks ago and came face to face with a guy with a small toddler and an Afghan hound. My dog can be funny with dogs he doesn't know, so I grabbed his collar as we approached. The guy saw what I'd done and so said loudly, Merlin, stop, and grabbed his dog and picked up the toddler. As we passed, I said, that's a great name for a dog. He looked insulted and said, Merlin is my son's name. Story 4. I had a roommate who demanded that I pay more in rent, utilities, and for general supplies because he opened a pay stub that I had sitting in a pile of bills on the kitchen table and realized that I made 3 times the amount he did. I was doing him a favor by letting him live in the apartment, ended up kicking him out, and now have the entire place to myself. Also, my name was the only name on the lease, so sucks to suck, I guess. Story 5. I came into my job, and my boss was running a bit late for an unknown reason. Now my boss is the type of person to joke about anything, no matter how serious it is, and will pull it off with a straight face. We never really take him seriously unless it is directly related to work. He comes in after being late, and after a bit, just casually says our close coworker had passed the previous night. I literally chuckled and said, yeah, sure, and blew it off. He then said that he died from a heart attack before he was set to go out with his buddies during the evening. I then said, oh, wait, are you actually serious? And he almost started crying right there and said yes. I miss that man to this day. Really chill guy with some cool hobbies and volunteer work. I also feel so bad for my boss because they had known each other for years. Story 6. Friend 1. Hey man, how come you decided to shave all your hair off? Friend 2. The chemo kind of decided for him. Friend 1. Duck off Joe. No, seriously, though. How come? Me. He's actually not joking funniest crap that ever happened to me. I'm basically fine now. On close monitoring for the next few years, but no further treatment. Commenter. I was in the 4th grade when one of my classmates had a legit seizure. Only his closest friend knew he ever had them at all, and he happened to be in that class with us. This dude was a huge class clown, always trying to get a laugh, but was generally a really nice person. Of course, he's up at the blackboard. It was actually green, strange thing to remember, and just starts convulsing. Everyone but his best friend thought it was a joke, laugh, but 90% of the other kids did. Once his friend jumped into action to keep him from slamming his head on the ground, it sunk in that this was real. I felt so bad for that kid, but as he was seizing, I really don't think he was able to hear the laughter. Sorry, Danny. Story 7. I once worked with a 50-some-year-old guy at my first job, who also happened to be a former crackhead. I added in that detail because his mannerisms and communication were clearly affected by his prior substances use, and he would sometimes laugh when he was telling serious stories. One day, he was telling me a story about him accidentally setting fire to the woods when he was trying to cremate his dead pet frog when he was a little boy. I was laughing my ass off. Strangely, so was he, until he looked me dead in the eye, with a face that's as serious as they get, and says, "I'm still not over it." I knew that look and knew he was actually being serious despite being in absolute hysterics with me while telling his story. I immediately felt like in a hole. He was cool about it though, thankfully. Story 8. An intern at the vet I work at was a very sheltered Mormon. He came to work one day panicked. He had his first kiss the night before, asked the girl to marry him, and was concerned about his wedding date. He was absolutely convinced that he got her pregnant by kissing her. Absolutely convinced. It took me a long time to register what he was panicked about because it sounded so absurd. He'd delivered hundreds of kittens and puppies by then. I just thought he had also learned about human reproductive anatomy as well as animals by then. Commenter 1. Reminds me of middle school. My friends and I grew up sheltered Christians. I was the least sheltered, as my parents still believed in science and dinosaurs, and my sex ed talk with them was informative and normal and featured all of the scientifically appropriate names for genitals and whatnot. They didn't want me to have sex, but they did me the decency of explaining how it worked and that it wasn't bad. It was for people who had made a strong commitment to one another and was fun when you did it right and were being smart. I didn't realize how lucky I was till a friend of mine panicked, asked me at lunch if it was true that a guy could get you pregnant through your genes. Insert my ha wait what moment, while she explains that she snuck out last night with a boy, and they had a heated makeout sesh, which involved some heavy petting. Her mom had given her the talk, and had told her you could get pregnant even if both partners were wearing clothes. To this day, I don't know if her mom was that sheltered as well, or if this was a malicious way to keep her daughter from ducking around, but I have never forgotten what seemed to my 14-year-old self as a great betrayal of trust between parent and child. And anyway, that'd be why she snuck out. If she had a normal mom, she could just introduce her to her boyfriend. Commenter 2. There are many things a very sheltered Mormon does not know. For instance, back in the early 90s when I was 12-ish, I was not allowed to watch cable at all, Nickelodeon included, unless my parents OK'd the show. They had reruns of the Monkees playing, and I loved them so much. Davy Jones was my first celebrity crush. I honestly thought they were a current popular band of that day and age. It wasn't until sometime during that school year I had mentioned the band to a friend and they had no idea who I was talking about. It was at that time I realized how sheltered my life had been so far and how much I wanted to see the real world for what it was. Had to endure 6 more years of church before I could leave. Story 9. Someone wanted to euthanize their dog because when she was put outside alone in heat, she found a chihuahua and had ugly puppies that cost a breeding session. When we asked what that had to do with anything, he said, "The chihuahua's semen is forever inside of her and can make those ugly puppies instead of the purebred." This dog was definitely not a purebred. When we said that things don't work that way, he said, "I know for a fact they do. That's why my daughter is half N-word. N-word abused my wife back when she was in her 20s and his semen stayed inside her until mine activated it. And we all know semen is more violent, so it won." He was serious. Story 10. Waking up from general anesthesia. One of the nurses by my hospital bed gently informs me that my heart had stopped while I was under. I thought I was dreaming for a while and didn't take it seriously. Then my dad showed up, and I saw the panic on his face. Then I phoned my mom, and she had obviously been crying her eyes out. Then I took it seriously. Commenter? It was a tooth extraction, of all things. Done under GA because I have a bad needle phobia and reacted poorly to the laughing gas they tried first. It really should have been an in and out sort of thing, but a few minutes in, my blood pressure tanked and my heart stopped. I was given medication and chest compressions and my heart restarted quickly. They didn't even have to break my ribs for the compressions, though I did have some extremely painful internal bruising. I spent most of that day in the hospital. Initially, it seemed that it'd be an overnight stay, but the cardiologist assigned to me managed to figure out the cause of my heart stopping, and also that the odds of it happening again without further anesthesia were basically nil. So I got to go home that evening, under strict instructions to do nothing strenuous, to avoid alcohol and non-prescribed substances, and to make sure someone could keep an eye on me. I live with my parents, so that wasn't hard. These days, it's mostly just a very interesting note in my medical history. Whenever new doctors see my medical notes, they have a moment of, "Damn crap, what?" when they get to the stopped heart. It's fun to watch. It was a really bad combo of biological factors. I have low natural blood pressure. Not dangerously so, but still low. I'm also on Proprano for migraine prevention, so my blood pressure is pretty low. This does not play well with anesthesia, of course. The way it was explained to me, the staff decided that the risk was still low enough that it would be safe, since it was a short procedure. Unfortunately, this procedure involved my mouth, which resulted in accidental vagus nerve stimulation. That, plus my crappy blood pressure and the anesthesia, made me go into bradycardia, and then my heart just noped the duck out. Story 11. When I learned I had totally forgotten to attend almost every single class in one of my college courses, I forgot I had enrolled in it. A classmate asked me, "Huh? Where have you been? You're never there when the teacher's taking attendance." And I was like, "Huh? Funny." So anyway, oh, wait, damn. Luckily, it was only about a month into the semester, and I managed to bring it back up to a low B. Story 12. When I was 18, I went with my then-girlfriend to Las Vegas to meet her parents. We were in Florida where she lived with her aunt and uncle. I found out that her dad and mom lived in separate houses right across the street from one another for whatever reason, which was strange, but definitely not the strangest thing that would happen that trip. Her dad came over to her mom's house to meet me, and I couldn't help but notice he was dressed in a suit. I thought maybe he was just a fancy dresser. He kept asking me questions about my family and how I felt about his daughter. He seemed to like me, and we went through the trip on fairly pleasant terms, but nothing else happened of any note. Once we get back home to Florida, my girlfriend decides to tell me that her dad thought we were coming out to Vegas to get married, and he dressed up because he was planning on taking us to get married that day. She had to tell him that we had no intention of getting married in Vegas. Story 13. I was on a Christian camping week here in the UK. There were some Americans with us. I found a stone on the beach with some great fossils in it and was showing it to some kids. One of the Americans started talking about how God had put fossils in the earth to mislead the vain who trusted their own observations rather than the Bible. I naturally thought he was joking and burst out laughing, and he was just so offended. He complained about me to the people running the camp, and they thought he was joking at first and laughed too. Commentaire. I used to teach drama camp. I would take suggestions from the kids on Monday, write a half-hour play based on those suggestions that night, and then they would perform it on Friday. I once had a parent come to see me after reading the script. She asked if there was a way to do a play with no conflict in it. I laughed, assuming that she was making fun of the other PC soccer moms I had to deal with, but she meant it. She wanted us to tell a story without any obstacles or confrontations. I then carefully explained to her that a story without conflict would not be a story, but just a series of occurrences. Man wants pizza. Man goes to fridge. There is pizza in fridge. Man eats pizza. Theater. Story 14. My estranged auntie sending me a message to disinvite me to my sick but alive father's funeral because, wait for it, I had lunch with my little half-brother and sister, and that is disrespectful to my father. My father never let me and half-siblings meet before this lunch had occurred, and by meeting them, he disowned me. Literally. That's it. Just my ducked-up family. Commander, I loved my dad. I just feel the need to say that ahead of time. My dad lived a very hard life. Never learned to read, worked with his hands his whole life to provide for my mom and I. One time when I was about 15, we were watching Jay Leno and he was doing jaywalking. I was talking about how funny it was that people could be that stupid. I said, "Can you believe there are really people in America who don't know how many stars are on the American flag?" My dad kind of chuckled and then said, "There are 52, right?" I cracked up, thinking it was a joke. And then I finally stopped to see the look on his face and realized he was serious. I felt like an absolute git because I knew he was hurt, but I just really never imagined he was serious. I learned a pretty important lesson that day about judging people and being careful what you say that might hurt someone. Story 15. When my 60-year-old father told me he broke his hip paragliding into the roof of his hotel. It was my parents' 60th birthday, and this was their wild, spontaneous event. Commenter. I used to have an elderly patient I just love because she's just a jolly sweet old lady, and she might have brought me some food from time to time. She's the type of lady that's just barely understanding technology, so she gets a smartphone and tries to stay up to date with everything that's going on, and kind of looks like this. So she believes in most of the clickbait articles and satire news like The Onion. One day, she comes by the clinic saying she's sick. I examine her. Just mild symptoms of a common cold, nothing too serious. I tell her that she has an infection, and this type of infection is treated without antibiotics because it's not a bacterial infection, but a viral infection. She understands that part, but then she asks me, "So I have a virus?" Me, "Yes, ma'am. What you have is a virus infection." Her, "So, do I have to stop using my smartphone to prevent my smartphone from getting the virus?" At first, I smiled because I thought it was a joke, and I found it cute. But she was dead serious. Like, she was concerned that she couldn't get her smartphone close to her mouth because her viral infection might spread to her smartphone and get hacked. I told her it was a different kind of virus, that her smartphone was going to be fine. Story 16. Years back, I dated a girl who would lie compulsively about random things. The first big example, I went to her place. She just got Assassin's Creed for the first time and was really getting into the story. Like a week later, she was telling me how she just discovered her family were related to assassins from Florence, I thought it was a joke, but turns out she was serious, had changed her surname to something Italian on FB, and had already spread the lie about on social media. In my head, I was like, I literally watched you play Assassin's Creed last week, but she was gorgeous. Way out of my league. So I put up with this and other crazy crap for another 6 months before I gave up. Story 17. It's ridiculous that tampon ads aren't banned. The fact they're allowed in public just goes to show that women have too much power. This wasn't in response to a particularly graphic ad that pushed any boundaries. Just a generic type about comfort and reliability. Took me a while to realize that he wasn't joking. Commentaire? Similar? I was working at an Italian restaurant, and the owner was an uneducated but business-savvy old Italian guy who had a quite good-looking wife. Once after he noticed my GF picking me up, he said to me, "You know what the secret of a good marriage is? You have to keep them stupid." I laughed, thinking he was just joking, but he had a death-serious look on his face. Later, I learned he had stopped his wife, they knew each other since childhood, from finishing school, and had forbidden her doing anything other than taking care of the 4 children they had together. Story 18. I'm in Australia, and first heard the news of 9/11s on my morning radio, USA Evening. I was stuck in traffic near the army base, and they announced it with sirens. To start off with, I thought it was a comedy sketch that I didn't think was particularly funny. I had a pretty dark sense of humor too. Then I realized it was news. Holy crap. Story 19. When I was in college, 2 friends and I went out to a cheap Chinese buffet for a weekday lunch. We were probably not particularly well-groomed or dressed at the time. So, at a nearby table there, a woman and a man having lunch, both dressed in business attire. After they finish, the woman, probably in her 20s, comes over to our table out of nowhere and starts chatting with us, making normal chit-chat. Kind of odd, but maybe she's just friendly. All of a sudden she asks, "Do you guys like sex?" We just looked at each other and laughed nervously because how do you respond to that in this situation? She just stood there, completely serious. I don't even remember what we said to her after that. This was 20 plus years ago. But despite sounding like the beginning of adult films, it was only followed by another round at the buffet, not a group sex. Story 20. Back in college, me and a few of my guys would get lunch every Tuesday. Me and 2 of the guys are there as normal and are waiting for our last guy, Todd. I start texting Todd and asking him about not being at lunch yet. The other guys start narrating what I should text. So I end up saying, Matt says, "Get your roly-poly looking ass over here." Steve says that you're the personification of washing your hands and getting your sweater sleeves wet. It goes on like that for a bit. Then Todd calls me directly. He says he can't make it because his grandma died that morning and was headed home to see his family. The look on the other 2 guys' faces when I told them was priceless. Story 21. Was working a job while in early days of college. It was in a popular American restaurant chain where I had been successful as a host, cashier, waiter, and member of their retail store for just about a year. I accidentally forgot that I had swapped shifts with someone and missed the shift entirely. But I came in a few hours after it had started to sincerely apologize and let them know I was going home to change and I'd be right back. They brought me to the back and told me I was fired. I laughed at first because the boss was occasionally a bit of a jokester. Then I realized he was serious. To this day, it gives me massive anxiety about underperforming in any job I have because I believe I will just be fired for it, and they'll move on regardless of my tenure or knowledge. Story 22. Colleague's wife confronting me on speakerphone. "Are you having an affair with my husband?" My exact response was to roar laughing, managing to offend them both simultaneously. Good job, geek peeps. Story 23. Oh, which to choose. In middle school, I had a habit of putting my foot in my mouth. Once I was in my English teacher's room finishing an assignment after school while she was talking to a parent. I finished and moved toward her desk, but stopped near her door so I wouldn't interrupt their conversation. As I was waiting, I could see directly to the girls' bathroom, where I saw a boy my age but not a student, small school, pacing in front of the girls' bathroom. I thought it odd and watched for a moment. Each time the door opened, he would peer as best he could into the bathroom, and I knew the JV cheerleaders were in there changing for practice. Alarmed, I said, there's a boy trying to look into the girls' bathroom." The teacher and parents stopped and quickly approached to watch the pacing boy. The parent then said, "That's my son." I started to laugh until I realized I was the only one. It was very awkward for a few moments till she excused herself, gathered her son, and left. The teacher still brings it up when I see her and laughs. For those of you curious of the outcome, he was on the spectrum, and his sister, whom he idolized, was in there. He was waiting for her to come out. Story 24. Is there a J in the alphabet? This was a year 12 student. Her name was Judith. This was in rural Australia. No other languages other than English. No religion. No accent other than Aussie. No other cultural background. Story 25. I listed my Ford Explorer for sale. A guy emailed me to trade his 2018 Kia Forte or something. I didn't really need one since my fleet already had a 2013 Kia Forte, but he emailed me a few times saying he wants my Explorer but owes money on his Kia. I said how much. He said it's an 8-year finance deal, so need to pay in total $45K. And he wanted my car. I could buy that car right now for $25-30K at the dealership brand new. He was dead serious. Story 26. There's a girl at work who used to call the icing sugar talcum powder. We didn't realize for weeks that she actually thought it was called that. She's actually a pretty switched-on girl in general. She just has these weird things. Story 27. Many years ago, I was having the "what are you into sexually" conversation with a girlfriend. We were at that point in the relationship. It starts vanilla enough and escalates to fetish and kink talk. At one point, the conversation went like this. "Would you let me put spaghetti in your pen?" I chuckle. "Haha, what? No." Thinking her next question would be about something else. What if it was cooked? How the hell would that help? What if it breaks? What if it was something more solid? "You're not putting anything in my pen." She got very upset and went off about how she needs to be with a sexually explorative and open person. She was legit mad at me because I told her I'm not into getting things stuffed into my pen. Story 28. I was spending the weekend with my first serious girlfriend, and I was still a virgin and honestly rather innocent. We had just gotten to her place, and I helped her make her bed. No big deal. Once we were done, she smacked the bed and said, "Let's sex." I wasn't looking at her at the time, so I chuckled and said, "Yeah, sure," and looked up at her and saw she was dead serious. I immediately retracted what I said and instead said, and I quote, "I would like to politely decline." Poor innocent young me. I was 18. We had been dating for a few weeks, maybe a little over a month. I was deeply in love with her, and she was the first girl I felt so strongly about. I didn't feel comfortable showing her my body. She was like a goddess, and I was a drooling troglodyte in comparison, or so I thought. I was inexperienced, naive, and I have ideals for myself for what a relationship should be. So yes, an 18-year-old dude declined sex with his girlfriend, and in a very nerdy way. I wasn't ready. And there is nothing wrong with that. There is no shame for that. I'm not a sex-crazed individual. I'm a person. I have ideals and feelings. And when I feel uncomfortable or don't want to do something, I don't do it. And again, there is nothing wrong with that. I don't feel bad for declining. Story 29. When Trump was running for president and then actually got elected, I'm not American and wasn't really paying attention to world politics, so I just thought it was a running meme that got out of hand because obviously that wouldn't happen in real life. It wasn't until a friend brought it up in casual conversation that I realized it was real. I still don't think I've fully processed it. Story 30. A coworker was talking about a problem her daughter was having. Coworker was in her late 30s, and daughter is about 13, 14. Her daughter was conflicted because her best friend since birth, born same day, same hospital, literally since birth, became friends with a black boy and wants to date this black boy. But God said it's wrong to date outside your race. It isn't natural and it's against God. Black people are fine, but they can't date and procreate with white people. It's wrong and a sin. So she is having a spiritual battle on leave her friend or save her friend from this sin. She had me in the first half then. All that racism came out and I couldn't believe it for a moment. Then I remembered, oh yeah, I am in Arkansas. Story 31. One day my boss asked me if I'd be willing to do some testing for new software our company had purchased. I already knew the program, so I said that was fine. He said I should expect to receive a meeting invite in the next day or so. The next morning, I have a meeting invite and I accept. I didn't recognize anyone else who was invited, but assumed that they were from the vendor, which is normal. Time comes for the meeting, and it's a dial-in sort of deal, which again is normal for this kind of thing. I dial in on time, and everyone is saying their hellos. And someone asks if I'm on the call. So I say, yep, I'm here. And things get started. The call starts with discussing some coding issues, which is fine, but has nothing to do with me. So I figure they'll get to the testing stuff in a bit. That is until someone says, oh, resting_fartface should look into that. At this point, it dawns on me. This is not my meeting. So I said, sorry guys, but I think you have the wrong person. And there was stunned silence. Who are you then? They ask. I give my first and last name, title, and location. Then someone starts laughing. This was the person who sent the meeting invite. They were trying to invite 2 other people to the meeting, one with the same first name as me and one with the same last name. Instead, he invited me. And apparently, I sound just like one of those people, so no one suspected anything until I spoke up. Commenter. I got invited to a meeting a few months ago, and while it was semi-related to what I did, I had no idea what the duck we were talking about. A woman piped up and said, Tara and I have been working on this. Right, Tara? I figured she was way behind in her work and never had a chance to contact me about the project. And I didn't want to blow up her spot on a big conference call. So I went along with it. Yes, we're making good progress. Interesting findings, etc. 5 minutes before the meeting ends, I realized there is a woman with my same name in a whole different group that would make a lot more sense to be working on. But I was in too deep, so I just went with it. I explained the mix-up to the other woman as soon as the call ended, and she was very grateful that I was willing to cover for her on a phone call to her bosses, even though she and the other Tara really had made good progress. Story 32. Hanging out in a bar in downtown Nashville, playing wingman to my buddy, and fending off advances of a very large drunk girl who thinks I'm more attractive because I'm married. I make small talk with a tall, lanky younger dude who says he's in town to play bass for some various bands. We talk about life in between songs, he tells me about being recently married, and we talk about our wives for a few minutes. After a long silence, he stares off in the distance and says, "Well, time to get this ring off and find somebody to duck, am I right?" It was at this point that I realized how drunk the kid was, and I spent the next 30 minutes explaining to him that no, being in a different zip code didn't count as a legitimate reason to cheat on your wife. Story 33. I understand people believing in the Bible, but it honestly never dawned on me that people took every story in it for truth instead of stories with morals as to how to lead your life. A coworker of mine mentioned how dinosaurs weren't real because they aren't mentioned in the Bible, and I laughed at his joke. He wasn't joking. Story 34. I had an ex-girlfriend try to claim that we were common law married so she could sue for alimony in my house despite not being together for a year, not living in the same home for any length of time, not sharing our financial situations with one another in the slightest, no shared bills, no joint account, etc. The basis for this was that I found it funny when friends joked that we were like an old married couple, and I didn't immediately clarify the situation to them. So that meant I'd accepted my role as her husband. Took a few court dates, and she walked away disappointed, while I walked away with my legal fees and a little extra. I could have gone after her harder, but just what my lawyer got probably wiped out most of her savings and maxed out her line of credit. So I'd have been paying my lawyer to try to wring blood out of a stone. Story 35. That there were no gay people as well as women didn't start getting emotional before the television was invented, and it started showing all that stuff. Also, that woman don't get manopause. That's literally how he pronounced it. Commenter. I met one who did believe in homosexuality, but is convinced that bisexuality is just what happens when you didn't get enough attention as a child. But it's also made up and greedy. He also didn't believe in depression, but thinks it can be cured with exercise and a healthy diet. I told him that I didn't believe in cancer, but think it can be cured with chemo and radiation. He refused to talk to me ever since. Just to clarify, I do believe in cancer. Just wanted to point out that it's stupid to believe in a cure, but not the illness it supposedly cures. Story 36. New relationship with a super nice lady. Romantic weekend getaway. She suggests an afternoon float down a nearby river in a canoe. I know from experience canoeing is a serious test of relationship potential. My ex-wife and I couldn't even carry a canoe from the beach to the bay without getting into an argument. Anyhow, new relationship, super nice lady. I'm determined to be a great team player and competent man. I have plenty of experience on the water. This should be a cinch. Canoe livery guy drives us to the drop-off. While he is taking the canoe off the trailer and telling us how long the float is and where the pickup point is, I am looking at the river. The wide, slow-moving river. The extremely slow-moving river. Along with the fact that it is a blustery, windy day, I can't, for the life of me, tell which way the river flows. Some leaves are floating left, some leaves are floating right. I toss in a stick, and it just floats around in a circle. I'm starting to sweat. I figure I have a 50-50th chance of guessing correctly, but if I guess wrong, it could be a disaster. Having to ask is a total embarrassment. I'm hoping the livery guy makes some reference to direction, but no. I'm desperately hoping to see someone else float by, but no. I picture us paddling upstream for 2 hours and being lost on the river. Livery guy hands us our paddles and says, "So, if there's nothing else, I'll see you in a couple hours. Have fun?" I bite the bullet and decide that asking is the best way forward. Yeah, which way is downstream? Livery guy and super nice lady both laugh thinking I'm joking. No, I'm serious. Livery guy stops laughing and just points. I'm sure he was thinking that was the most stupid thing he had ever heard. We paddle downriver a bit and super nice lady says, "Boy, am I glad you asked. I thought downstream was the other way." Story 37. Yesterday, my mother called to tell me that she thinks I have the coronavirus. I have seasonal allergies and no symptoms related to the virus. BDW. She then proceeded to tell me that scientists discovered the virus cannot live over 133 degrees Fahrenheit. At first I got excited that a breakthrough had been made and thought, maybe I missed the news announcement. Then she said, "Yeah, so they're saying if you plug in a hairdryer and keep breathing in the hot air, it will kill the virus and you will be fine." I immediately started cracking up because I thought she had made a joke. Then she got very offended and said it was a real scientific video she saw on Facebook. Facepalm. Story 38. The gal we rented our apartment from very seriously said, "There is one thing I need to warn you about." We were ready for anything after this somber statement. "The last people who lived here say the apartment is haunted." We laughed and said, "Haha, you got us. You sounded so serious at first." She stared at us blankly. She totally meant it. Story 39. Was looking for a room apartment? Decided to look at some of the cheaper listings. Set up an appointment to look at a place listed at $400 per month, when similar places in the area were about $450, $500 per month. Show up on time, but the guy who was showing it is nowhere to be found. Call him. He says he was running late and he'll be there really soon. 30 minutes later, I'm pretty patient. He shows up, this approximately 22-yo Indian guy with a super thick accent. He walks me into the place and I'm immediately hit with a blast of hot air with a super strong curry odor. First stop kitchen, dishes everywhere piled on the counters, in the sink, dirty pots still on a filthy stove with 2/4 elements missing, light bulb burnt out, fridge handle nearly broken off, etc., etc. Next is the living room, I guess. 2 grimy fold-out mattresses on the ground with some sheets laying around. Carpet clearly has food crumbs and spills everywhere, about 50. 60 Coke cans in the corner behind one of the fold-out mattresses. He comments, "This is where my roommate and I sleep. Could have fooled me." Also have Archer in my mind talking about how one might get ants as I look at those Coke cans. Off to the bedroom. It has what looks like piss, stained mattress laying on the ground, barely able to fit into the tiny room. One of the closet doors is broken off the hinge. The other won't open all the way because the mattress is blocking it. He tells me, "You'll sleep here." I mean, sure, probably, but I'm pretty sure I can sleep wherever the hell I want in my place. Last stop, the bathroom. Surprisingly, doesn't look that bad. Some soap scum in the shower, but toilet, sink, and countertop look relatively clean. So I'm thinking it's pretty clear why this was so cheap compared to other places, but I might be able to make it work with a lot of cleaning and repairs. The guy then goes into more detail about the rental arrangement. First, he now tells me that I won't be renting the whole place, just the bedroom, while him and his roommate live in the living room. Ha 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 ha. That's a good one. You guys staying in my apartment. Good one. Wait a sec. And the clues start falling into place. This guy and his buddy actually want to rent out the bedroom for 4/5 of the total rent so they can continue to live there for $50 per month each. Duck. I'm already ready to nope the duck out, but I'm not great at making an exit, so I let him continue to explain the details. Next stipulation of renting this place. I'm not allowed to eat meat or animal-derived food in the apartment, not even my room, as he and his buddy are both vegans and can't stand the sight of non-vegan food. Also, my time to utilize the shower is between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. while I will be at work, because his buddy showers in the morning before class and requires hot water, and he showers when he gets back from class at about 5 p.m. and also requires hot water. And showering after 5 p.m. is not allowed, as they will either have people over or will be going to sleep shortly after, and a shower will keep them awake. And finally, I will be given an equal responsibility to wash dishes and clean the apartment, even if I don't eat anything in the apartment or don't go into any room other than my bedroom. He says if I'm interested, I can give him the $600 deposit and $400 first month rent right now, and can move in immediately. I just let him know I'd think about it and get back to him, and got the duck out of there. Story 40. For my 14th birthday, I asked my mom what she got for me. She told me she bought me a vest. I laughed right at her face and went on a rant about how I hate vests. I thought she knew that beforehand. Fast forward to my birthday, and I received a brand new vest from her. I felt so bad. Story 41. I used to house sit for some neighbors of mine when they would go on trips to Europe without the kids, who were in college. Their house was awesome with a theater, pool table, and plenty of extra bedrooms, so usually I'd just stay over there. Occasionally, one of the kids would swing by the house. The daughter came by one day with her BF, and they went to her room. Suddenly, I hear yelling from upstairs, Greg, come here right now!" I was a little worried as to what I would walk into finding, but no, it wasn't that. She's sitting at her laptop, pointing at a chat box she had opened to one of her professors. She quickly exclaims, "I just told my fitness walking professor I walked for 60 minutes at 3 miles per hour. How far did I walk?" I was laughing so hard until I looked over at the BF, and he had a straight deadpan face, and my first thought was, "Oh God, you're serious." When I told her she had walked 3 miles, she exclaimed, "That can't be right. That doesn't make any sense. How far would I have gone had I walked for 45 minutes then?" Well, I guess that would be 2.25 miles then. I had to explain 60 minutes equals 1 hour and basic multiplication to this girl. 2 other fun stories from this girl. At California Pizza Kitchen, when the waiter asks if we'd like to hear the soup or salads of the day, and she quickly asks, "What's a super salad?" Another time house sitting. It's 10 p.m. and suddenly whoosh, a bunch of bright halogen lights kick in the front yard. I immediately think it's the cops. But when I open the front door, it's the daughter doing some late-night gardening. It was apparently supposed to be her birthday present to her mother, and she had to do it during the week after class. I tell her not to cut the electric dog fence line and put her dad's lights back when she's done. Next morning, I let the dogs out and they go running down the street. I ask her if she knew she cut the line, to which I get a sharp, "I didn't cut the line. I just found where it ended." I can't wait for this idiot to come fix it, so after work, I dig up the 2 ends, splice them back together. And as I'm putting the electrical tape on, she pulls up with that BF of hers. She went on with a whole spiel of how she was going to fix it and ends with, "Well, what can I do to help?" I told her she could test the line to make sure it works. She asks how to do that, so in frustration, I tell her, "You put the collar on." I thought she'd notice the sarcasm, but no. She walks into the house, grabs one, straps one prongs in on the palm of her hand, and walks up to the line. This particular model beeps when it gets close, so you don't even need to get to the shock. But no. She walks up to the line and says, "Greg, I don't think it's working," with an immediate asterisk beep asterisk asterisk beep asterisk, and then it shocks her. I stare in disbelief as she just stands there, shaking arm up and down as I keep hearing beep, beep, shock, until it finally flies off her hand, and somehow she graduated. Story 42. The second time in my life I went out on a date with a guy who brought up 9/11s wasn't real. The first time it happened was in 2012, and it was surreal. When it happened again a few months ago, all I could think is, oh no, not again. Well, at least I found out quicker this time. Story 43. I used to ask my then GF to marry me for the Z because she always told me she would never get married and she always answered no. Then, after 7 years together and a kid, I asked her to marry me for real and she went, "Ha ha ha, no, wait, you're serious?" She said yes, BTW still together, 15 plus years total. Story 44. A previous coworker of mine went on a 5-ish minute tirade about how much he hated me, to my face, while at work, in front of 10 other people, including our boss. Up until that point, I had never met someone who had disliked me so strongly, at least no one who said anything about it. So I thought he was joking for the first minute or so. I stood there with this incredulous grin on my face until he paused for breath and one of my other coworkers asked if he was serious. He said, "Damn, yeah, I'm being serious," and started accusing me of being racist, disrespectful, and of favoritism, none of which were true. That quickly wiped the grin off my face, and I stood there dumbfounded until my boss came over and told him to stop talking and to walk away. Everyone stood around kind of shell-shocked for a bit before we laughed it off. No one knew where it had come from, and he spent the rest of his time there trying to convince everyone else that I was evil, but they all ignored him. I'm extremely grateful for that. He could have made that job a complete hellhole. Story 45. While mountain biking with my friends being ahead trying to do some smart-ass things, slipping and falling down. When my friends meet up, me. Stupidly grinning, "Guys, I think I broke my arm." My friends, "Haha, you're right, bro." Me. Lifting my left arm and showing that it is bending in 3 places now. My friends, me. "So who wants to drive me to the hospital?" But honestly, friends were quite helpful in the end. One of them bicycled back to his home and brought his car. I was in the middle of a forest, so remainder of my friends walked me a km and a half to where the car could come, loaded me and my mountain bike on it, and off I went to the hospital to get my arm fixed. It has become our go-to topic now, whenever we meet. We still laugh remembering about it. Story 46. Not mine, but an ex-employee. He had been assaulted by the boss, and they wanted to pay him off and let him go. I sat in on the firing, and he had a smile the entire time he was being told he was fired, and then I saw the aha moment in his eyes, and he said, "Wait, you are firing me after I get assaulted?" The disbelief and outrage were full bloom. Leave it to say he did not go quietly, which he shouldn't have. Others before him had. In the end, he prevailed. The boss was in entertainment, old Hollywood, where this kind of thing is a daily occurrence in male lives. Doesn't address a lot of the male abuse that goes on there, and it can be severe. Story 47. 50-year-old coworker thought that stars were in the sky, as in, they're in this planet, and thought shooting stars were them falling. When I told him that those stars were millions of light years away, and some were 1,000,000 times bigger than our sun, he just couldn't comprehend what I was saying. Never convinced him that otherwise. Story 48. I went to a Southern Baptist church a few times. The preacher mentioned the earth being 8,000 years old, or whatever absurd number it was. I had to internalize my giggle. After I left, I mentioned it to a friend and was about to make a smart-ass comment when she interrupted me to tell me how glad she was the preacher doesn't mind speaking the truth. I started laughing, thinking she was joking. She is well-educated, evidently not a fan of science. She proceeded to tell me that things like carbon dating hasn't been proven, but the Bible? Solid proof. Story 49. I used to work at a funeral home that did a yearly Christmas celebration. It was super nice. We'd invite all the families we had served that year for a mass and coffee after, and they'd get a lovely metal snowflake with their deceased loved one's name on it. The whole point was about not spending the first Christmas after a loss alone. So it was run by staff volunteering their time, and I figured, hey, let's help this year. There was probably about 250 people there, and boy did they make a mess of the reception hall. Hundreds of plates and cups to be washed, coffee spills, cake crumbs, food everywhere. Not to mention the bathrooms, chapel, hallways, lobby, and entrance needed to be cleaned. No biggie, I'm part-time surplus staff for receptions anyways, so this is crap I've dealt with before. Plus, there's like 30 of us. Once the reception was over and everyone went home, my manager congratulated all of us and said since we did such a good job, the salaried employees could go home and the part-time staff could clean everything up. I was the only part-time staff member. Of course, I laughed and pointed out I was the only part-time staff there. My manager proceeded to laugh and then said, "Oh, I'm sure you don't mind. All right, everyone let's go and I'll see you all when the holidays end." Only one salary employee stayed behind to help me clean, my mother's former coworker who took pity on me, and it took us about 6 hours to clean everything. I never volunteered to help with the Christmas gathering again. Story 50? A coworker at a restaurant this week told me his hands were hurting from all the extra hand washing, and I told him we keep moisturizer in the break room. He asked me why he would need moisturizer if he's been soaking his hands in water so many times in a day. I explained to a 29-year-old man with a house, a car, and a child how soap works. Story 51. Through high school, I had a friend who was rather secretive about his crushes. There was one crush in particular that he refused to name, so I spent weeks guessing and pestering him. But I wore him down, and he agreed to tell me, so I said, "Finally, who is this girl?" And he said, "It's not a girl." I thought he was joking, so I laughed and said, "No, really, who is it?" And he just stared at me. Super embarrassing for me. But he and his boyfriend are very happy now. Story 52. At work, it's pretty common for people, especially dads in their 40s, 60s, to jokingly ask for a discount, so I'm used to being like, "Haha, no, sorry. Wish I could, though." One day, a guy who looked like a middle-aged dad asked for a discount, so I laughed and said no. He followed up with, "Why not?" Dead serious. Your boy was trying to negotiate a discount. For like no reason, not even like military or AARP, just wanted me to give him like half off his rate for asking, I guess. Story 53. I met a girl at a former job and we took a fancy to each other quickly. I only ever knew her by her nickname at this point, but we hung out for breakfast and I asked her name. She replied Bubbles, and I began laughing in her face, thinking it's a joke. But no, her parents legitimately named this girl Bubbles, and I just had a deep, hearty laugh at how freaking stupid it was in her face. Story 54. Well, okay. My knees are double jointed, as are my arms and thumbs. So I went over to sit by one of my friends and I sat on my leg in a way that apparently made it look like it was broken. So she asked me if I was okay. I still didn't get why she was so freaked out, so I just started eating a pack of fruit snacks. Then she asked me if my leg was okay, and I said, yeah. She started staring at it and was saying that it was making her nauseous because it looked like my leg was broken. So then I stood up and showed her my leg's full range of motion, which at the time, I thought it was normal to have your knee appear to be backwards, and she passed out. It wasn't a great time. Story 55. I have trouble with the concept of underwater telecommunications cables. It's a running joke now with my husband, because for some reason I can't wrap my head around their existence, despite the obvious fact that that's how transoceanic communications have to work without satellites and the numerous pictures, videos, and other clear evidence of their existence. I was in my early 20s, watching some TV or movie with my husband, and I idly commented on how it was done. Did they lay a giant cable across the Atlantic? And I was in disbelief when my husband told me that of course that's what was done. I spent a stupid amount of time trying to believe in this. What if a shark bites through it? How did they even know it would work? That's a lot of cable. My husband couldn't believe how naive I was on this issue, but it really was a case of, I've never thought about it before. Crap, that's overwhelming. So while I totally accept that the oceans are full of underwater cables, I still giggle at the idea 15 plus years later. One day I want to go to a place where they come up out of the water. I need to see these things myself. Story 56. I had a new coworker ask me how to use those big and bulky calculator with the roll paper in it. I thought he was joking. Big nope. I just told him you just press the buttons. Story 57. My moment was when a coworker died just the day after retiring. Let's call him Bob for the sake of the story. I came into work during shift change. It was early afternoon and the morning shift had learned that Bob had died. Me. All right, lads? What's with the long faces? Coworker. Bob died. Me. Damn, I spoke to him just a few days ago. Coworker. It's true, mate. Hart gave out yesterday. His daughter found him. Me. Still waiting for everyone to start laughing. Oh, crap. You're serious? Management came out later to inform us that he had passed away. 67 years old. The same thing happened about a year later with another coworker. He came back from sick leave for getting an infection in his stomach. Was at work maybe 2 months before getting sick again. He wasn't getting better, so they rushed him to the hospital. Terminal disease in his stomach got him a few days later, 55 years old. When a friend told me I thought he was taking the piss again, it's kind of surreal when they're suddenly gone and you've just spoken to them the same day or the day before. Story 58. Leaders these days don't even have any vision, not like Stalin. Now there was a leader. He gave his entire life, devoted so much to his country. It's just about getting the right person in power. Quote from weird Russian janitor at my work. He also told me that Canada's national agenda is to make everyone gay. Both statements were hilarious, until I realized he was fully, entirely serious. Story 59. Have a friend who has some serious mental issues, schizophrenia, I think, and he used to believe he had these powers to control people with his mind and that he can see into the future. Well, about 2 years ago, I stopped hanging out with him, and he ended up going to a mental hospital on and off about 6 different times. I recently started going to a tech school and saw him there. We caught up and he seemed to be on meds and a lot more normal again. Well, I went to chill with him last week and he brought up his powers and I thought he was just ducking with me, so I said, "Oh, ha, real funny, Frankie," and he is like, "Nah, I'm dead serious, dude." And then he mentioned something about how he just started taking his meds again. Yikes. Story 60. When I used to work at PDX, I had a woman point to an ambulance with its lights on and say, "Why do they have to park here? They're taking up so much room." I said, "You do realize that's an ambulance, and that ambulances come here when someone is sick or injured." She said she understood, but it wasn't convenient. I told her I'd go in there and tell the guy having heart attack he should have waited for a better time. Story 61. We had dinner with family while my siblings and my cousins were teenagers. While on the way there, my mom said, "There will be a family announcement and all you have to do is shut your mouth and listen to it." I'm thinking my single aunt found somebody, or my cousin is coming out. Whatever, I'm ready. So about halfway through dinner, my aunt cues my cousin to speak. She's kind of quiet. Tension is thicker than the poorly cooked steak in front of us. And she starts with a shaky, "Well," to which my dad cuts in, "What? It's not like you're pregnant." Absolute silence. And my dad is looking around with a dumb smirk, waiting for someone to laugh at his joke. My siblings and I are half smirking in our own nerves as the anxiety chokes us like a poorly cooked steak. And then the tears started. All he had to do was shut the duck up. And the steak was really poorly cooked. Story 62. I'm a grade 3 teacher. One of the students I got this year had a reputation for causing a tantrum when things didn't go his way. However, I had built a degree of rapport with him early on, so he hadn't shown much of that behavior throughout the year at this point. We played bingo one day, and I promised the winner a small incentive the following day, to which he won. I had to call in sick and schedule supply the next day. The supply called me at the end of the day and told me one of my students flew into a rage, trashed the classroom and the trophy cases in the hallway, and broke his glasses by throwing a chair at his face. The supply I called was a friend back in teachers college, so I thought he was joking. He was not. Last time I played bingo without a prize immediately ready. A definite learning experience. Story 63. I play a lot of disc golf, and this guy I played with regularly, but is a little off. Meets me at a local community college course one day and starts telling me about the last time he played there, and how he threw a shot over the pond and some kids approached it, picked it up, and walked off with it. He tells me he yelled at them and told them, "You'll be sorry next time." So as he's loading up his disc bag, he takes a pistol out of his glove compartment and tucks it in his pants, just in case they're there again, on a college campus. Yeah, I don't play with him anymore. Story 64. Oh, you're restructuring and want me to give up what I was hired for and stand at a cash register while this is happening? Nah, damn you. I quit today. I've never quit a job before, but here I am. Story 65. Met this conspiracy theorist at a coffee shop. He tells me that all the technological advances since World War II are from aliens. President Truman signed a treaty with them. The aliens dole out microwaves, computers, etc. And in return, they can abduct a few people for tests. When that Malaysian flight disappeared, the aliens needed a bunch of people. Story 66. I'm a first aid instructor in Germany, and I was at a retirement home teaching the staff. A woman told me that she read on Facebook that the only thing you need to do when someone has a stroke is to stick a needle into the patient's finger, because there will be something like a pressure equalization in the brain. I started laughing because I thought it was a joke. She was 100% serious, and I had to explain her that it's not true. that it is really important to call an ambulance because a stroke is really dangerous, and that Facebook isn't the best source for medical questions. Story 67, not me. My uncle ran summer programs for youth to get jobs, work, etc., and was someone who was straightforward and loved joking with the teenagers. He is introduced to a teenage girl and speaks general questions. She doesn't respond. So then he jokes, "What are you, deaf or hard of hearing or something?" To which my cousin tells him, "Yes, she's deaf." The young lady herself found it hilarious and signed to him that it was a relief that he didn't do the standard, raise his voice and yell, because that's what most people do to the deaf community, and treated her like he treats everyone else. Story 68. A former boss told me that when he was in the army, he and his buddies used to catch wildlife and kill it. Mostly animals that wandered too close to the firing range, but with cats, he would capture them and light them on fire because it's hilarious. And then he'd do a pantomime of the cats running in circles, flopping around until they got slower, and finally did the last flop. All the whole making cartoon cat noises and laughing. He loved telling animal lovers this because he thought people who actually liked cats were gits. Ducked up, man. Story 69. I grew up in Asia, and when I was 12, I had an English tutor. My weekly homework was to translate a one-page text my tutor wrote up from English to Chinese. I did this by flipping through a Chinese-English dictionary. I was a very diligent student. That's why I became very distressed one week when there was an English word that kept on appearing in the text that I couldn't find in the dictionary. I came back the next week in shame and told my tutor I had failed my homework. He said, "Connie, this is your name." Story 70? I honestly think the coronavirus topic has been one of those. And honestly, I feel that, oh wait, your serious moment hasn't actually occurred in most people in USA yet. Story 71. Got to my new place of employment and was meeting the team that was going to train me. One of the trainers says, "I hope this goes better than my last trainee named Joe." "Did he not make it?" I asked. "No, he died." I just sat there waiting for a punchline or something, chuckling nervously. The supervisor said, "Oh yeah. Was he the one who ran his car into a pylon?" Needless to say, I survived training. Story 72. When a coworker told me that climate change isn't real because I have a friend in England and it's snowing there. One of those moments where your brain blue screens you, so all you can do is just walk away. Story 73. I was on the receiving end of one just yesterday. My state just issued a shelter-in-place order during the workday, so our HR manager came by everyone's office to let us know that we're an essential business and won't be closing. So I ask, "Will we be getting hazard pay?" She kind of chuckled at me, but then she saw the look on my face, stumbled over some half-answer, and backed out of my office. Story 74. Meanwhile, here are the Philippines. Some couple named their newborn child Pandemic Bryant, after the current pandemic and Kobe Bryant. And yes, they were serious. Story 75. I was traveling in America some years ago. A girl in a shop asked where I was from, and I said Denmark. She looked confused, so I said, "It's in Europe." She then asked me if I could say something in European to her, so after a second I started just saying random words in different languages. It seemed to satisfy her. Story 76. Because of Corona, all Germans who work in Switzerland now do home office. We started selling Swiss to German adapters to every second customer. Some dude showed up and asked me how many we had left. Told him about 100. He said he'd buy all. I laugh, he laughs and says, "No, I am serious." Never lost a smile that fast. Story 77. Friend in high school told me her mom tried to kill her. I laughed. Other friends looked at me awkwardly while the girl said, "No, really, she's a horrible mother." I didn't know how to respond. Story 78. This was a few years ago. I forgot how the topic was brought up, but I clearly remember my older sister saying, "There aren't any modern buildings in Egypt, just pyramids."